Say, I know that song. You mind if I give you a small rundown? No, not at all. Sit down.
Frank Sinatra and I, as you probably know, are doing this together.
For years, Peter Lawford stood shoulder to shoulder with Hollywood's coolest inner circle, the legendary Rat Pack. He had the charm, the looks, the connections, and even family ties to power. Yet almost overnight, Lawford was quietly pushed out, erased from photos, and rarely spoken about again. What really happened behind those closed doors? Why did men like Frank Sinatra turn their backs on someone once considered a brother? After 40 years of silence following his death, shocking details have finally come to light. And the truth behind Peter Lawford's fall from the Rat Pack is far more dramatic than anyone imagined. Peter Lawford's early life seemed to script his destiny long before Hollywood ever did. Born in England with polished manners, a soft accent, and movie star looks, he appeared tailor-made for elegant leading men. When he arrived in films during the early 1940s, studios quickly recognized his natural charm. His first breakthrough came in 1942 opposite Mickey Rooney in A Wink at Eton, a role that positioned him as the ideal image of youthful sophistication. By the late 1940s, Lawford was no longer just a promising newcomer. He was a certified star. Critics praised his ease on screen, and audiences were drawn to his effortless warmth and refined presence. One of his most memorable early performances arrived in 1947 with Good News, where he played college quarterback Tommy Marlowe. Set in the carefree spirit of the Roaring Twenties at fictional Tate College, the musical captured Lawford at his peak, handsome, confident, and seemingly untouched by the troubles that would later shadow his life. Throughout this period, he appeared in a steady stream of romantic dramas and lighthearted comedies, quietly building a reputation as one of MGM's dependable leading men. But Lawford's life would soon extend far beyond movie sets. In 1953, his romance with Patricia Kennedy, sister of rising political star John F. Kennedy, changed his public image forever. Their marriage 2 years later placed him at the intersection of Hollywood glamour and American political power. After becoming a U.S. citizen, Lawford actively campaigned for JFK during the pivotal 1960 presidential race, even casting his first vote for his brother-in-law. For a time, he seemed to have everything: fame, influence, and a growing family of 4 children. Yet beneath the polished surface, cracks were forming. The marriage unraveled in 1966, reportedly strained by infidelity and Lawford's deepening struggle with alcohol. Though his personal life faltered, his career continued with roles in films like Sergeants 3 and Ocean's 11, alongside the men who would define the Rat Pack era. Lawford would marry 3 more times, but the early promise of his life, so full of elegance and possibility, remained tinged with a quiet sense of loss, a reminder of how brilliance and heartbreak often travel hand in hand. The story of the Rat Pack didn't begin under neon lights in Las Vegas, but in smoky rooms filled with laughter, liquor, and restless ambition. Most accounts trace their origins back to Humphrey Bogart, whose circle of friends in the 1940s formed the earliest version of the group. This was never an official club, just a loose brotherhood of stars who found comfort in each other's company after long days on set. Their ranks shifted constantly, but the names attached to that first gathering now read like Hollywood mythology: Spencer Tracy, Cary Grant, Errol Flynn, Katharine Hepburn, Judy Garland, Nat King Cole, and a young Frank Sinatra among them. They drank together, joked together, and briefly escaped the pressure of fame as equals. When Bogart died, that original circle quietly dissolved. The laughter faded, the nights grew shorter, and everyone returned to their own careers. Yet the spirit of the group lingered, and Sinatra, unwilling to let it die completely, began assembling a new inner circle of his own. He casually referred to them as the Clan, a half-joking name for a group bound by loyalty, ego, and late-night excess. Over time, the name Rat Pack resurfaced, and this time it stuck, becoming synonymous with swagger, rebellion, and mid-century cool. This new incarnation was stacked with talent. Dean Martin was already a chart-topping singer with an effortless charm that audiences adored. Sammy Davis Jr. was a whirlwind of ability, singing, dancing, acting, and drumming with equal brilliance while carrying the weight of being perpetually underestimated. Joey Bishop, sharp-tongued and observant, became the group's comic backbone, often shaping their films and stage routines from behind the scenes. Against that backdrop, Peter Lawford's presence seemed puzzling. He wasn't the loudest, the funniest, or the most acclaimed, but Lawford offered something none of the others could: direct access to political power. Through his marriage to Patricia Kennedy, he became a living bridge between Hollywood excess and Washington ambition. At the time, John F. Kennedy was the Democratic Party's rising star, radiating youth, confidence, and a new kind of glamour. In many ways, JFK represented the political version of what Sinatra embodied on stage. Lawford didn't just belong to the Rat Pack. He symbolized its moment in history when fame, influence, and illusion briefly merged before time and tragedy pulled it all apart. As Peter Lawford's star continued to dim, his personal life became a restless cycle of brief romances and fractured promises. In October 1971, he married his second wife, Mary Rowan, the daughter of comedian Dan Rowan. For a moment, it seemed like a fresh start, but the marriage quickly unraveled. Within 2 years, they had gone their separate ways, finalizing their divorce in early 1975. Another quiet ending in a life once filled with grand entrances. Between marriages, Lawford drifted through high-profile relationships linked romantically to actresses Jill St. John and Priscilla Presley. These connections kept his name in circulation, yet they also hinted at a man searching for comfort more than commitment. In June 1976, he rushed into marriage again, this time with aspiring actress Deborah Gould, after knowing her for only a few weeks. The union barely survived the summer. They separated within 2 months and divorced the following year. Afterward, Lawford retreated to a high-rise apartment in Los Angeles' Sierra Towers, living high above the city that had both crowned and discarded him. It was during this unsettled period that he met Patricia Seton. She would become his fourth and final wife in July 1984, standing beside him only months before his life quietly came to an end. Less a love story than a final chapter marked by longing, impermanence, and fading echoes of Hollywood glamour. Peter Lawford understood the unspoken rules of the Rat Pack better than anyone. His closeness to the group elevated his Hollywood standing far beyond what his film career alone might have achieved, and Frank Sinatra made sure he never forgot it. With a mix of humor and quiet cruelty, Sinatra dubbed him Brother in Lawford, a nickname that carried an unmistakable reminder. Lawford's true value lay not in star power, but in access. Among the swaggering giants of the pack, he was the connector, the man who opened doors no one else could. At the time, politics and show business were circling each other like dance partners, and Lawford stood squarely in the middle. The Kennedys and the Rat Pack shared a mutually beneficial bond, each feeding off the other's glamour and influence. Through Lawford, Hollywood gained a pathway into political power, while Washington borrowed a bit of movie star shine. It was a fragile, intoxicating alliance built as much on illusion as loyalty. Lawford became the quiet broker of introductions that would later echo through history, acting as a bridge between Sinatra and the Kennedy family. He played a role in bringing John F. Kennedy into contact with Marilyn Monroe, among other famous faces of the era. Rumors followed, whispers that Lawford helped arrange encounters meant to satisfy egos and cement alliances. Whether out of ambition or obligation, he moved pieces behind the curtain, growing more influential even as he lost control of his own image. Sinatra's tireless campaigning and fundraising for JFK proved invaluable, and Lawford was the conduit through which much of Hollywood gained access to the future president. When Kennedy prepared for his historic debates against Richard Nixon, it wasn't a seasoned politician he turned to, but Lawford. Drawing on his film experience, Peter advised him on lighting, posture, wardrobe, and the subtle language of the camera. Kennedy listened. The result was a performance that defined television-era politics. In hindsight, Lawford's power was real, but fleeting. He stood at the peak of a moment when fame could shape history, yet he remained painfully aware that his influence depended on others. It was a bittersweet role, essential yet never fully respected and destined to fade once the spotlight moved on. Peter Lawford's fall came quietly, then all at once. On the surface, everything still looked golden. John F. Kennedy had won the presidency. The Rat Pack was printing money through hit films, sold-out concerts, and lucrative endorsements. And Hollywood seemed firmly intertwined with power. But behind the scenes, tension was building. especially from Robert F. Kennedy, who grew increasingly uneasy about Frank Sinatra's long-rumored ties to organized crime. The mob had always hovered near fame, particularly around Italian-American stars, and Sinatra's association with Chicago crime boss Sam Giancana raised alarms that could no longer be ignored. Giancana wasn't just a shadowy figure in Sinatra's orbit. He was also dangerously close to the Kennedy family itself. Lawford, forever the middleman, found himself entangled deeper than ever. His easy familiarity with mob figures and movie royalty had already helped facilitate sensitive introductions, including the now infamous connection between Marilyn Monroe and the president. Each favor increased his importance, but also his risk. The breaking point arrived in 1962. Lawford helped arrange for President Kennedy to stay at Sinatra's Palm Springs estate, a lavish gesture meant to honor the friendship that had helped propel JFK to office. Sinatra went all out, even constructing a helipad to welcome the president. But just days before the visit, everything unraveled. Robert Kennedy intervened, persuading his brother to cancel the stay. The public explanations cited security concerns. Privately, it was fear of mafia associations, of Giancana's reach, and of the optics surrounding Sinatra. Lawford was left with the cruelest task of all, delivering the rejection. Sinatra was humiliated, blindsided, and furious. Instead of staying with Sinatra, JFK chose Bing Crosby's home, a safer and cleaner option politically. For Sinatra, the insult was unforgivable. His rage focused squarely on Lawford, the man who had once been indispensable. The consequences were swift and absolute. Lawford's roles were quietly erased from upcoming Rat Pack projects. Invitations stopped. Phone calls went unanswered. The friendship between Sinatra and Lawford ended without reconciliation, without closure. In a world built on loyalty and image, Lawford learned the hardest truth of all, that power borrowed can vanish overnight, and when it does, it leaves nothing behind but silence. Peter Lawford's final years unfolded far from the polished image that once defined him. Behind the lingering smile and carefully tailored suits, his life had become a relentless battle with addiction. Drugs and alcohol took a firm hold, and although he entered treatment more than once, recovery never truly came. His body bore the cost of decades of excess. Even as the public continued to see him through a softer lens, as a charming relic of old Hollywood, a smooth-talking palais boy who seemed forever frozen in his prime. That image was fed by stories that clung to his name. He was often remembered as the first leading man to share an on-screen kiss with a young Elizabeth Taylor, and as the final person to speak with Marilyn Monroe before her sudden death. These moments gave him an almost mythic aura, casting him as a quiet witness to Hollywood's most intimate and tragic chapters. Yet charm could only carry him so far. The same indulgence that fueled his reputation slowly dismantled his health and stability. By the early 1980s, Lawford's life was unraveling. He was deeply in debt, physically weakened, and emotionally exhausted. In 1984, his body finally gave out. He suffered cardiac arrest compounded by severe liver and kidney failure, an ending shaped by years of hard living. In the days leading up to his death, some wondered whether he might finally speak openly about the secrets he carried. After all, few people had stood so close to power, fame, and scandal. But there would be no last confessions. By the time he was placed on life support, he was no longer conscious or able to communicate. Whatever truths he held died with him. Lawford was cremated, and his ashes were initially placed at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles, resting among many of Hollywood's legends. Even in death, however, his story was unsettled. A dispute between his widow, Patricia Seaton, and the cemetery led to his remains being removed several years later. In 1988, his ashes were scattered into the Pacific Ocean off the California coast, a quiet, anonymous farewell for a man who once lived at the center of glamour and influence. Despite the turbulence of his personal life, his contributions to film and entertainment were not forgotten. Lawford received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, a permanent reminder of what he achieved before the fall. A plaque bearing his name also stands at Westwood, marking his place in history. In the end, Peter Lawford remains a symbol of Hollywood's golden age, elegant, conflicted, and ultimately undone by the very excess that once made him shine.